What's up everyone, and thank you for stopping by the channel. Today's project is this Weed Eater brand Hedge trimmer. It was bought from a yard sale, but it was sold as is, and of course it's not working. Let's take a good look at it and find out what's wrong with it, and hopefully we can fix it. In this video, we try and repair this hedge trimmer, but this fix may not be the one you need for yours. We'll explore other options later in the video. This is not a commercial unit by any means, but it's built better than most electric ones you can find today. The difference is that when the electric one dies, it's cheaper to buy another electric one. Now, gas-powered ones are 3 times the price of the electrics, and when they don't start, it's worth a few dollars to try and get them running again. Let's check it over first and make sure that everything is working like it's supposed to before we try and start it. And it looks like we found our first problem. The fuel line is brittle and has broken off the carburetor. We're going to have to replace these lines if we want to get it running. The trigger seems to be working like it's supposed to, and after pulling on the rope, the engine seems to have plenty of compression as well. And of course, there isn't any gas in the fuel tank, which is just fine since we're probably going to have to replace the fuel lines anyway. The next thing to do is to check and see if the engine will even run. To do this, we'll remove the air filter and put some gas into the carburetor throat and then try pull starting it. Unfortunately, I put just a bit too much gas in the carburetor, so it's flooded now. This will take a few pulls to get it started. Well, luckily it started, but now I'm wondering if it'll run if I just reattach the old fuel line to the carburetor and put some fuel into the tank. Now, if it doesn't start, then we'll take the carburetor off and check if the inlet screen is clogged and if the metering diaphragm has hardened over time. Well, the good news is that it runs perfectly, and we didn't even need to go through the carburetor. Well, the bad news is that we have to replace the old brittle fuel lines, which isn't that easy. After draining out the gas, we have to take the handle apart to get to the fuel lines. Now, we don't need to take the screw off at the trigger because that's where it pivots from. With the handle taken apart, we can now see both fuel lines and where they go on top of the tank. All we need to do now is disconnect the lines at the carburetor and then remove them from the tank. The smaller fuel line is for the fuel filter, and it still looks great, so we'll reuse it. Now, the larger fuel line measures out to be about 190 thousandths of an inch, or about 3/16. The smaller fuel line is about 125 thousandths of an inch, and I got this one from a local hardware store. Now, simply measure out more line than you need, and then cut it at an angle to make pushing it into the tank a whole lot easier. Then do the same thing for the larger fuel line. It's better to cut more than you need and then cut off the extra later on. Next, push the angle cut into the hole into the tank and then reach into the tank with some pliers and pull out the line. It will be tight, which is exactly what we need to keep the gas from leaking around the lines. After you get that done, do the same exact thing for the smaller fuel line. And unfortunately, there is a problem. The fuel line is a little too loose in its hole, the tank, and it's going to leak there. What we need to do is replace the smaller line with the same bigger line as before. The only thing we need to do now is to make the hole just a little bit bigger. Now, don't make the mistake of making the hole the same size as the fuel line. I think I ended up using a 160 thousandths drill just to make sure it'll be a tight fit and it won't leak. Okay, that's a lot better. I can feel a lot of resistance when pulling the line out of the tank now. After pulling the fuel line out of the tank, cut the angle piece off and then connect the fuel filter to the line. Then cut the lines to length and then connect them to the carburetor. After that, we can then run the lines through the access holes in the handle and then put the handle back together. Another reason why your hedge trimmer may not be starting is a carburetor problem. The easiest thing to do is just replace it, but if you're up for a challenge, then get the rebuild kit. Before we try starting this hedge trimmer again, I want to replace the primer bulb. These are really cheap on eBay or anywhere online, so buy more than a couple so you'll always have one ready. So it seems to be working just fine now, but it could have been much worse. To avoid this problem in the future, make sure you buy 100% gas. You can try using gas stabilizers as well, but I suggest just running your equipment dry between uses. So my question is, would you use a gas hedge trimmer over an electric one? I've used both before and I know which one I prefer, but I'm very curious about your answer. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate your time. Please feel free to ask any questions, and I hope to see you in my next video.